So are you involved in any aspect of logistics outsourcing? Maybe as a service provider or as the client? You know, I'm sure I read somewhere that something like 85% of businesses around the world now outsource some element of their logistics and supply chain. So I've got a question. Why do so many screw it up? What I'd like to share with you this week is 4 things that so many companies screw up when they're going through the outsourcing process. Coming right up. Okay, in terms of logistics outsourcing, I've probably been helping companies for at least 23 years in a consulting capacity, helping them through the process of selecting appropriate service providers and negotiating contracts and all kinds of things. And I've seen the trend for outsourcing grow in that time, but I've also seen companies make the same mistakes over and over, and they're really silly mistakes, to the extent that very often my team and I are called in when things have kind of fallen apart and we've got to fix up an outsourcing contract that was kind of doomed to failure right from the start. So look, I could probably spend at least an hour going through maybe a dozen things that people get wrong and that lead to a bad outsourcing contract, but let me just pick on 4. If you'd like to know more, comment below and I'll happily share more, maybe create some more videos about this topic. But let me just focus on the top 4 for now. So, number 1, and we're talking generally here in logistics outsourcing, so it could relate to freight or warehousing. Number 1, they don't allow enough time. And companies will come to us and say, hey, we'd like you to help us through the outsourcing process. We know that you've got a robust system for doing this, and we'd like it all done in the next 2 months. And we have to say, that's a bit of a push. You've probably got to allow a little bit more time than that, and obviously depending on what you're outsourcing and the complexity, but just think about the time frame for a moment. You've got to put together a document which the potential providers are going to bid against. And that's quite a detailed document. You're going to outline all of the services that are going to be provided, the service levels. You're probably going to put in a draft contract. I always recommend that so that, you know, it's the power of the draft. You also want to put in, you know, things around KPIs and how you're going to measure their performance. You know, lots and lots of detail have to go into that. This is not a 3-page letter. A request for tender document, look, it's hard to put page numbers on it, but it's going to run at least 20 pages, if not 50. There's got to be a lot of detail in there and a lot of attachments. Because if you think about it, you've got to provide enough information for those potential service providers to really understand your operation and how they're going to resource it. So time frame, for something simple, 3 to 4 months at least. More often than not, it's going to be 6 months, because you're putting out your documentation. You're going to allow them 4 to 6 weeks minimum to respond to it, again, unless it's something really basic. You're then going to evaluate all of those responses, and you're going to go and visit the various potential service providers, and you're going to negotiate contracts and implementation. So it is quite a time-consuming thing. So what I would say to you is that if you're thinking of outsourcing, or for some reason you're thinking of changing outsourcing partners, think about the time frame and get started soon. Just as an aside, if you're already outsourcing and you're thinking of changing partners, I would ask you why. It's a very disruptive thing to do for your business. Did that initial contract get set up poorly? Can you save it? Can it be renegotiated? Because to go through the whole outsourcing thing again is very disruptive to your business. So, number 1 was time. Make sure you got plenty of time. Number 2, this is probably equal first in terms of something that goes wrong. Data. I have been involved in outsourcing contracts, both freight and warehousing, where we've looked at a value of a contract for anything from a couple of $100,000 up to 20 or 30, $50 million. And the thing that people get wrong so often is not providing enough data. And I've spoken about this before, and I'm going to talk about it again because it's critical. You need to provide very detailed information as part of your request for tender process around the products, product master and weights and dimensions of products, around the customers, where are they, where are products being dispatched to, delivered to, around your existing performance, transaction history. Typically I'd be saying you want to provide 12 months of transaction history. Here's all the orders that went out, the order lines, because the service providers have to analyze your business to that level of detail because they're going to design a solution to meet your business needs. And if you can't provide that level of detail, they're going to make it up. Not quite that. I mean, they're generally more professional than that, but they're going to have to take a bit of a guess, and they're going to have to make some assumptions, and they're going to have to put in some contingency, and it's going to end up costing you more. And of course, if the cost is here when you start, it's very hard to peel it back through the life of the contract. So data is really important. Now you might be thinking, but what if I don't have all the data? Okay, well, sometimes you don't, but you really have to make a best guess at the profile of the orders and so on. And if you can't even do that, you need to make sure that the people bidding on this work can actually get access maybe to your facilities and so on to have a look. Because you really got to do everything you can to help them understand the operation. Because otherwise they're just guessing about what resources to provide to help you in delivering this service. So we've had time and data. Clarity is the next one. Be very clear about what you're outsourcing and what you're not. And don't hide things. I have seen outsourcing contracts go right down the toilet because the 3PL turned around after about 6 months and said, hey, you didn't tell us that you had 10% level of returns, or you didn't tell us that we had to do kitting. We had to put Australian power cords in the packs, with all the products. And all of that takes more work and more resource and more cost. And if it wasn't costed in, guess what's going to happen? They're going to come to you and say, hey, we're doing things that we hadn't budgeted for. We need some more money. And so don't think that you're going to get away with that kind of stuff. I'm sure you won't be thinking like that, but sometimes companies will think, oh, it's hard to quantify that, or we're not quite sure, we don't need to put it in the RFT, the request for tender. You do. You need to put in everything that the service provider is going to have to resource. And if you're lacking in some information, well, maybe you can sit down with them and make some really good estimates. Okay, so we've had time, data, and clarity. The last one is approaching the right people. So I have seen companies over the years kind of do a web search and say, oh, we found 10 companies that seem to be a good fit for us. Let's invite them all. I'd suggest that's probably a little bit too many. I have seen companies really invite the wrong types of service providers. So let's say, for example, we're doing chilled food distribution, and you're inviting a company that doesn't do chilled food distribution, they only do ambient products. They're going to be wondering why they've been invited to tender. And I'd be questioning, why are you asking them? Because they don't have the experience in the services that you need. So be quite selective and be smart about who you're picking to participate in the tender process. Because if you pick too many, or if you pick some that are clearly not appropriate to look after your business, you're basically undermining your own credibility. You're demonstrating to the market that we don't understand the market enough to know who to talk to. Now, there are some exceptions. So I've been involved in a lot of government contracts where they have to basically go to open tender. I understand that, understand the reasons for it. Generally what we do there is we'll put an extra step in the process, which is like an expression of interest, and then selected companies will go forward to the request for tender. The reason we do that is the expression of interest is just like a filtering step. It doesn't require too much effort on the part of the people bidding. It gives them an opportunity to demonstrate, if they're capable of doing the work and so on. But it doesn't make them go through that whole RFT process, which can be lengthy and costly for someone bidding on the contract. So that's another way if you are obliged to actually go to a much broader market. Okay, so as I mentioned, there could be at least a dozen things that I could share with you on why logistics outsourcing goes wrong. For now, Just think about the time frame. Have you left enough time? Think about the data. Are you providing enough information for them to accurately resource and cost this contract? Think about clarity about which services, the service levels you require, and think about making sure that you're approaching the right people. Okay, so if that's helpful, I'll put some links below, which will give you, I might actually give you not a draft contract, but actually it's a, what do you call it, contents page of a draft RFT, which would really help you in understanding the complexity involved. If I can share that, I'll share that below. But I'll certainly put some links below to other articles and videos which will help you. And don't forget, if you find this video of use, please make sure you subscribe. We have a new video coming out every Wednesday. If you'd like any more information about logistics outsourcing, or if you want to share some experiences, please do comment below. And other than that, we'll see you next week with another topic on supply chain logistics.